Hey, folks, and welcome to another episode of Believe TV. I know you don't see me yet. That's okay. That's some technical stuff that's happening on this end. Hopefully, you guys can hear me, however, and hopefully, I can correct this in just a moment. But I do want to say hello to all of you who have already tuned in and who are saying hello. Uh, and this is some of our regulars, in fact. So we have Miss Karen saying hi from Germany. Always happy to see you, Miss Karen. Thank you for joining us. Have my dear friend Dee Dee, who's saying hi from Southern California. So happy to have you as well. And Mr. Jerry Dyson saying hello from New Orleans, Louisiana. Always happy to see you as well. And Miss Renita Cook, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. So again, yes, you can't see me, but I do know that you can hear me, and people are messaging saying, yes, we hear you. Okay, great. So for the time being, and in some cases, that make it a better show that you can't see me. You don't have to put up with that, but you can hear me at least, and so that's great. And hopefully I can correct that momentarily. In the meantime, we're just going to go ahead and go with the show and hope that um, that this little issue I'm having will correct itself momentarily. Um, anyway, thank you again for watching. If this is your first time tuning in, I welcome you and thank you for joining. And sorry for the technical difficulties. Again, I hope that we will be able to correct that soon. However, this is an interactive program, and we encourage you to say hello and to interact with the topics that we have on. Sometimes we have guests, and sometimes it's just me talking about different topics. Today, as promoted, today's topic has to do with two things, experiences from my youth that have recently become relevant again and recently resurfaced in a way. And so I've been thinking about this, and I thought, yeah, you know what, I want to share this because on the one hand, I always have that concern that sometimes when I'm talking about myself and telling stories about myself, that it's too self aggrandizing, or it's too much of me, instead of making it about other folks. Hey, Miss Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us. So happy to have you on as well. If you're just tuning in, you can hear me, but you can't see me. But I'm hoping to correct that in just a minute, and I will let you know what the progress is on that. So I'm doing that as I'm speaking to you right now, trying to fix that issue, and hopefully I can do that very soon. That is my hope and goal. Okay, so the hopefully the audio is back now. I realized what I did. um, and so hopefully you guys should have the audio back now. That's because I was testing something and I was trying to fix it off screen and it didn't quite go as I had planned. but that's okay. Um, I am going to refresh that and see if that works. And anyway, what I was saying was sometimes I'm reluctant to talk about my own personal issues because I don't want it to make it seem like, oh, I'm just talking about me. Bruce is in love with himself and his own voice and all of that stuff. When that's not really the case, what I really hope is through sharing my story and the stories of the different guests that we have on that are usually my friends and family members and stuff like that, that those will help you to embrace the possible, that they will be inspirational and help you in some way, to bless you in some way. So I hope that today's show will do that as well. Will in some way uh, bless you who are watching and help you to in some way, some form or fashion. So, talking about two issues that happened to me in oh, I guess I should take this off the screen. Um, so, oh, and Miss Sylvia Walker is also here. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you very much for being here. So, things that happened in my youth. So there are two major things that when I think about my youth, there are two major experiences that happened in my life that have helped to frame and head the direction of who I am and what I've done with my life. And both of those issues, both of those experiences are things that have recently become extremely relevant again in my life. And so I wanted to share those with you. One, just as an announcement, just to let all of my friends and family and everyone know that these things are happening. And also, again, as I said before, hopefully that you will glean something from it that will be positive for you. So, having said all of that, um, I so let's start with the first one is so I'll tell you, I'll share these stories with you. um let me tell you what both of them are, and then I'll tell one story and then the other. Okay, so the two experiences were one when I actually began when I was 14 and I had an opportunity to see the Young Americans perform. They came here to my hometown of Bogalusa, Louisiana, performed at the high school auditorium, and they did a show called A Tribute to Richard Rodgers, or the other name is To Richard Rodgers with Love. And so it was all the music of Richard Rodgers, all the Broadway shows and all the different stuff that he's uh, written and co-written with others. And it was an incredible show. And that experience, little did I know at the time, would change my life. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is from a very early age, I had determined that I wanted to make my life, I wanted to be involved in music. Um, Actually, anything creative, but music was my real love. The idea of writing and singing and performing and recording, all of that. So I wanted to be a recording artist, a singer, songwriter, recording artist. That was my dream as a young person. And I was encouraged through the years, both by my family and uh, my teachers, uh, choir directors that I had, and the like, and friends. So yeah, you got some talent there. Yeah, we think you've got what it takes, kind of thing. And so from a very, very early age, I began writing songs. And when I say early, I mean before the double digits. So, I mean, like at age 9, I was already writing songs, um, melodies and lyrics primarily, right? And I'd begun teaching myself to play the piano um, and other things like that. So, um, in sorry, trying something else with my computer. Um, so in the midst of everything that I was trying uh, to do, um, my dream kept bouncing. It's like how was I going to get there, right? So um, let's talk about first the issue with the Young Americans. So for those that don't know, the Young Americans is a nonprofit organization and a performing arts group or troupe, you could say, that have been around since 1962. It's originally formed by a gentleman named Milton C. Anderson. He is no longer with us, but he was the founder. His idea was to use music and the performing arts to show the world that the bad rap that young people were getting in the media and in the world and in press and all of that at the time was unwarranted, and wanted to show that there were some good young Americans out there. And so he proceeded to put this group together, did a huge talent search to find these incredibly talented young people and to put together a choir, but not just a choir that put across the image of a nice cross section of America, all different looks, sizes, shapes, all of that, but also sounded great, good ambassadors, but they, in addition to singing, they would also move. So the Young Americans are actually credited with being the very first show choir in America. So the first ones to step off the risers, take off the robes, and move and dance and add theatrics to their performance. So, so that's who the Young Americans are, right? Um, a lot of you, and let me clarify something so I can make it clear. So for the first 25 years or so existence of the Young Americans, maybe a little longer than that. But right around there, just right around 25 years. So the first 20 or so, 20 to 25 years, the Young Americans did recorded albums. They did concerts and they appeared on different television shows. When I was a youth, I saw them routinely on different variety specials, like Bing Crosby would have a special, or Lauren Green, or Johnny Mathis, or like big stars of the day. They'd have these holiday specials and different specials that would come on, and on these shows they would have all these different guests, and many times they would have the Young Americans. And so the Young Americans would come on and they would back up these stars, or sometimes just perform on their own. And they would be, sometimes, conducted by Milton Anderson, and other times they just get out there and do their thing. And they were incredible. So as a kid, I remember watching them on TV and thinking, how cool, that's amazing, they're so great. Well, in 1978, the Young Americans brought their show, Salute to Richard Rodgers, or To Richard Rodgers with Love. They were doing a national tour through the Columbia Artist Concert Series. And we used to have that back here in my hometown. So we'd have lots of different shows and artists and stuff that would come through and, do a show or do a couple of performances and then move on. And so the Young Americans came, and I heard about it and I knew they were coming. But at that time, I was in high school. I was 14 years old, and I had what people would refer to now as like a garage band. So had a group of young friends, my friends from high school, and we had a band. And so we wrote music and we practiced. Usually it was at my friend Jeff Parnell's house. His father was a pastor and lived on the other side of town from me. And we usually go over to his house, and they had a music room with a piano, and we'd set up the drums, and people bring in their other instruments and stuff. And we'd we do a combination of things. We would play music, and we would also, write music and stuff, but we'd also listen to albums and gain inspiration from those things. And so we had a regular night that we did that. I don't remember what night of the week that was. It was probably a Friday night. I'm not sure. But anyway, as it so happens, on this particular uh, time that we would normally have our rehearsals is when the Young Americans were going to perform. So my brain just said, well, oops, I guess I won't be able to see them this time because I already have something going on that night. And um, as I always say, God had other plans. So there were these ladies in town who were educators, and they belonged to my church, and they were the Levy sisters. And so they had tickets, uh, for the whole concert series of all the Columbia artist stuff. So they routinely had tickets. And so something came up, and they were not going to be able to go see the Young Americans. And so they gave the tickets to my mother and said, give these to Bruce. He would appreciate this. And so, like, great. Um, my mom said, great, thank you very much. She came home, she told me about it. And I said, but Mom, I have band practice, I can't go. And those of you who know my mother can already tell you what the response was. It's like, I didn't ask you if you wanted to go. I said the ladies gave you the tickets and you're going. So you get to choose who you'd like to take with you, but you're going to this, and show appreciation for this gift. So I had to call my guys and tell them, sorry, can't rehearse tonight. And so my friend Jeff, who would always host our practices, said, I'll go with you. And so the two of us went to this concert at or show at the Bogalusa High School auditorium. I remember not exactly where I sat, but roughly where I sat, and watched this show. And I remember feeling just magic and love and just this amazement, and watching these young people put on this show with singing, dancing, and comedy and acting. And it was just incredible. And inside, I kept thinking, man, I want to do that someday. I want to do that someday. Really, really wanted it. And as it turned out, at intermission, they announced that after the show, we'll be holding auditions for a summer. I'm going to call it a camp, but it's not really a camp. um, Basically, it was the American Music Theater, and it was something that they held up in northern Michigan by audition, and they would take several hundred people, young people, up there, and they'd spend the summer, and they would take classes in singing, dancing, acting, theater, all of it, and then put on several productions throughout the summer for the communities up in northern Michigan. And we stay at North Central Michigan College in the dorms, and we daily have these classes, and we get to work with these amazing directors and choreographers and all these folks, and then put on these professional shows with a live orchestra, and like it was just amazing. And so anyway, I was one of three people that were chosen to go take part in that. And so I'm trying to speed the story up a little bit. So yeah, auditioned, made it, went up that summer, and then once you were up there, you had an opportunity to audition again for the actual Young Americans to actually make the group. But one of the things they told us as soon as we got there was, okay, you guys are all going to audition for these shows. And they were doing Fiddler on the Roof, Gypsy, and I felt like there was a third one, but then there was also the Evening with the Young Americans show. I feel like there was one more show, but I can't remember what it was right now. Fiddler on the Gypsy. Anyway, something else. So they you get cast in these shows, and you would get cast in 2 shows. That's why I said there had to be another show, but I can't remember what it was. Anyway, um, you get cast in a show, and then you would, um, or you get cast in 2 shows. And if you happen to get cast in the Evening with the Young Americans show, you didn't have to audition for the group you were already in. They were basically saying you've already become a Young American if we choose you to go directly into that show. And so I was fortunate that I got chosen to be in that show. So and I remember someone having to explain it to me when we were, because that night that night that they announced it, we'd all gone out into town to this disco. And so when we came back, the announcements were posted on the wall, and we got to go see, who was in what show and everything. And someone had to explain to me, man, you're a Young American already. Like, you've only been here 2 days, but you've already made it. And so I'm like, wow, it's incredible. So, I went through the summer. It was amazing. It was educational. I made some incredible friendships and relationships, learned so much um, about performing, about staging, about how you rehearse, about being a professional in the performing arts. So, moving on, I finished out that summer, and the Evening with the Young Americans show was the last show of the summer, and had an amazing time. But when I left there, I remember thinking, that was a wonderful experience. It'll probably never happen again, because shortly after that, I had a conversation with my parents. And in order to join the group, that meant I had to go out to Southern California, because that's where they rehearsed and put all their shows together and all of that. And so and by this time I was 15. So I'm like, my parents were like, there's no way, you're not going out there. You're going to stay here and you're going to finish school and all of that. So as far as I was concerned, that was my experience with the Young Americans. I loved it. Now move on, go back to the original dream. Let's move on. Well, as fate would have it, as God would have it, that wasn't the end. So fast forward a little bit, and I'm going to try to do this as fast as I can. So fast forward. Actually, there was the following year, or later that school year, I did get contacted by the Young Americans again, asking me if I'd like to go to Japan with them on their next tour, which also would have required me to go to Southern California and rehearse with them and all that stuff. And again, my parents said no. So then that was really, like, for me, the nail in the coffin. I'm done. They'll never ask me again. I said no, so they'll never ask me again. So fast forward, I graduate high school, go to college, and I trying to remember. Yeah. So, and my other story actually overlaps with this story, just a little bit. Yeah, Miss Emma Ross is saying, as I remember, Kate James from Franklinton was a member of the Young Americans also. Yes, she was. She's much younger than me, so hers was later. This was in the late 90s, right, or early 2000. Yeah. She's so talented. Yes, and she still is, and she's an amazing human being. And I've gotten a chance to know her and work with her on different things before. Yeah, Kate James is amazing and a really good friend. So, anyway, so my end of my freshman year, and I'll come back to the other story in a minute, but end of my freshman year, I am at Loyola, which is where I went to school in New Orleans, and I get a phone call from Bill Brawley, who is one of the directors with the Young Americans, and he asked me if I'd like to come up to Boyne, Highlands in Michigan for the summer and join their dinner theater cast. So they had a dinner theater that they did every summer. The Young Americans did up at this ski resort called Boyne Highlands in Harbor Springs, Michigan. And so he invited me to come do that. He said we already have the cast, we've already put the show together and everything, but I need a really good bass. And I remember that you were a good bass. And so I can't even begin to tell you why he remembered me and why he knew that I had a bass and why he still had my contact information. But I was grateful for it. And I ended up going up that summer. And so I was back in the Young Americans again. I was performing at this dinner theater all summer at this ski resort. And it was awesome. And I got to renew some acquaintances, people that I had met back when I was 15, back in 79. And I also got to meet some new folks. Anyway, going forward, I then went on to do a dinner theater in Atlanta. And then a little bit later, I got another call. And these are all situations where each time I thought I was saying goodbye. Well, that's my last thing of Young Americans. Goodbye. Another call would come. Hey, here's an opportunity for you. You want to come join us and do this? Yes. So there were a number of those that happened over the years until eventually I moved on my own and started doing my own thing and producing shows and directing and performing and lots of other stuff. So now fast forward another bunch of years where I've been out of contact with Young Americans for several years now, and all of this with the organization. When, well, I should say, there was a point in time when I came back home and found out that the Young Americans now were not just doing the records and concerts and tours and things like that. They were now doing outreach education, music education. So they were doing workshops and tours. And that's how Kate James got in, right? Because she was part of that era. So that was ushered in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so when I got a chance to see the Young Americans again at that point, that was all brand new to me, that side of it, them working with kids and all of that. And it was interesting because I had already been working with kids just prior to that. In fact, the first time I saw the Young Americans do an outreach show was in Franklinton. And I took a group of kids that I worked with, which included, for those of you from Bogalusa, included Chad Harry. So I grabbed him as this young guy and said, come ride with me. We're going to go see this. This is the group I've been telling you about all these years. Let's go see them. Right. So my next encounter with the Young Americans was really to work with Milton Goler in Bogalusa, who was then the choir director at that time, to bring the Young Americans back to Bogalusa, because they had not been back to Bogalusa. They've been to Washington Parish, but they'd not been back to Bogalusa since I saw them back in 1979. So this was probably 1984, or wait, no, not 84, 94 at this point, where I worked with Mr. Milton Goler to bring the Young Americans back. And we had over 200 kids from Washington Parish, from Bogalusa, that participated in this incredible program. So that was kind of my reintroduction to the Young Americans after, nearly a decade of being away from them, or whatever. So suffice it to say, my life has been, with regards to the Young Americans, has been involvement, thinking I'm done, another callback, thinking I'm done, and the pattern just continued. Excuse me. So I, so which one were we at? Oh, so we did the thing in Bogalusa. Eventually I moved back to California, did some other projects out there, whatever. So fast forward to now, my oldest daughter, Kayla, being old enough now where she could join the group. And I took her to a rehearsal once. When I found out where the Young Americans were rehearsing, I took her and I'm guessing she was 17 or 18, something like that. And so I took her to a rehearsal just to watch. And she'd heard me talking about him, and she actually participated as a little girl in that workshop that came to Bogalusa, right? Um, and so she knew about the group, and all my kids had always heard me talk about it. So then here we are, and she saw it, and she was like, "Man, I want to do this." And right then and there, um, Bill Brawley, who was conducting the rehearsal, said, asked her if she'd like to sing for them, and so she sang. And as I remember it, she sang "Smile," Charlie Chaplin. If I'm not mistaken, I think she sang "Smile." I could be making that up, but that's what I think. And so then, right then and there, he said, well, "You're in if you want to join." And so when we left, I remember her saying to me, "Dad, am I really? Was he serious?" I go, "Yeah, yeah. So you can join them, later when they do the new kids and stuff." And that was only going to be like a month or two later or something. And then she turned to me and she said, "You know what? I'd rather go through the normal audition process because they did have a Southern California, open call for young people to come and audition." And so she went and did the formal audition. And again, she made it. But I've always given her kudos for that because she wanted to be sure that she wasn't getting it because of me and my name, that she was getting out on her own merits, and she did. You know, in fact, I don't even think I went to the audition with her. I think I dropped her off and picked her up. So I was not part of that process, as I recall. Um, Moving on. So now she's in the group, and she finishes her first year, does a new kids show, does a Christmas show, and all of that, and I'm watching all this happen, and then she goes on her first tour, and she goes to Germany, and all of that, and then the next Christmas comes around, and I'm seeing the Christmas show, and uh, anyway, long story short, uh, the directors turn to me and say, "Hey, how would you like to start going out on the road and directing the Young Americans?" And so the first one I got to do was South Tour, that my daughter was on that cast, and we got to come to my hometown, and I got to direct in my hometown, the Young Americans. So that was already like surreal for me. Like, are you kidding me? This is where on the same stage where I first saw them live, and then brought them back, so the other kids could experience it. And now I'm coming back as the director. So that was intense for me. So just on a personal level, that was just like, oh my gosh. And so did that. That led to me directing with them all over the country and then all around the world. And it's been the most amazing journey, right? And so I've had this long experience with them, and all of this stuff, and lots of different things, from the dinner theaters, from directing around the world. We talked about last week. We talked about the whole thing with Japan. I've been to South Africa. I've been to all these amazing places, and then, um, like I said, just incredible experiences that I've had with them. But then there came a point where I thought, well, that's it, and I, moved back home and thought, well, I'll still work with them from time to time, and I did for a minute. And then, it's been a few years, and obviously, COVID happened, and a number of different things happened, and I won't get into the details of it, but there's been some restructuring and some changes and stuff at the Young American organization level. And so they're, um, I'll use the word rebooting, but it's not really a reboot. They're just continuing. Um, and so recently, and I won't get into the whole long thing, but I guess the the long the long short of it is that um, after thinking and being sure that I was, well, that was it. That was a long, nice, amazing ride with the Young Americans, and all three of my daughters have been members of the group, and I've had a chance to direct all three of them on tour and see them perform in various venues and all of that. After having gone through all of that and teaching at their college and everything that I've experienced with the group, I thought, well, okay, now it's time to move on. I moved home and was focusing more on Believe and things within my own community. Well, through a series of phone calls and reaching out and touching base and whatever, I am, I guess, officially announcing that I am back with the Young Americans again, at least in short term. We'll see how long this time lasts. But I've been asked to come back and to direct their summer camps and some projects in the fall. So I am writing a new show for them and producing some shows up in northern Michigan and possibly some other projects and stuff, which I won't go into. I don't really have the sort of the okay to go ahead and tell you everything right now. But so that's something that began when I was 14, and now here I am, 57, and it's back in my life again. Like, just keeps coming back. I thought of this the other day. I kind of laughed after I got off of a Zoom meeting with the CEO the other day. Um, I I was thinking about I think it's Al Pacino. Is it Al Pacino? I was confused. Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. I think it's Al Pacino, who the phrase from The Godfather of like, because every time I think I'm out, they keep pulling me back in. So if you've ever seen that movie, you know what I'm talking about. So, oh, hi, Miss Sylvia. Thank you for that. I'm assuming that's a congratulations. Thank you. Um, I'm really excited for a number of reasons, and um, one of the things that's amazing, and one of the reasons I wanted to share the story is just because it's not about me, and it's not about my talent or anything like that. It is all about God, and it is amazing. I talk about all the time, like how I tend to analyze and sometimes overanalyze things, but it's looking at that thread, right? The Just looking at that timeline of my life and all the different stuff that um, that kept leading me back, and each time being sure that's it, that's it. Thank you, God, for this opportunity. I now know that that season is over. Time to move on, and then I'd be back again. I go, thank you, God, for that opportunity. I'm sure it's done now, and move on. Can't tell you how many times that happened of me thinking, well, that was it. That was the end of it. And I will miss it, and it'll always be a part of my heart, but wow. And so I am honored to be able to help this next generation of young Americans um, in some way maintain that magic and that love that this 14-year-old boy experienced in the auditorium of the Bogalusa High School, right? That I want that for them, and so I wanted to be a part of that journey. Of I wanted to be in the room, and I am honored to say that they um, have graciously asked me to come back and to come back in that capacity, in some capacity. So I'm grateful to be able to do that. Miss Cynthia says, Bruce, thanks for sharing your awesome journey. You've definitely been a blessing to so many, including the soul lady who I love you too, and all that you stand for. Bless you. You're amazing. Keep shining. Bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And you have been a constant support, and I appreciate you so much. Everything I've done in the community, I can, every time there's any type of production or something I do with the kids or whatever, I can always look for you, and you're always out there in the audience. So I appreciate that. Glenn, you be great, and you are awesome. Oh, thank you, Miss Karen. I appreciate that. I know that you love the Young Americans too. Um, but I'm just grateful for that. So, so now let me jump over into my other story, and I'll try to make that one faster. So, and like I said, there's overlap in these two stories clearly. So go back to the original dream, right? That I wanted to be a singer-songwriter. Um, my biggest inspiration was the Jackson 5, Michael Jackson. I was really into Earth, Wind, Fire in Chicago. Lots of different artists, but that's what I wanted to do in my youth. I wanted to write music, and I wanted to record, and I wanted to do concerts and all kinds of stuff. And you guys have heard me talk about my boy band days, and and all of that. Um, but before the boy band started, going back to 17 years old, me graduating from high school and preparing to go to Loyola University in New Orleans. And so the summer, just prior to entering my freshman year, I went to orientation that they had at Loyola during the summer. And so I go to this orientation, and they take you on these tours, and they divide everybody up into groups and stuff. Um, and you go there, and you also take tests for placement. What classes are you going to be in? And which ones can you skip, and all that sort of stuff. And you get to speak with guidance counselors, and all that. So in the process of doing that, and I'm just I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. So in the process of doing that, um, and moving across the campus, I remember seeing this girl, and she was so pretty, and I just remember thinking, I want to meet her. Like, I really want to meet her. But if you knew me back then, you also know that I was kind of shy. So I just wasn't the type. I just really wasn't that guy who would just walk up and go, "So hey, baby, how's it going?" That just wasn't me. And I had already kind of told myself in my mind, yeah, you don't have a shot. No way on earth. But I kept seeing her. Right? We kept our groups kept kind of passing each other as we were doing the tour, and I kept seeing her. And then, school starts, and again, I keep seeing her around the campus. And when I go in to eat lunch in the cafeteria or whatever, when you go through that little lobby area or whatever, there's an area where a lot of the students would study, and just kind of hang out and study and stuff. And so I'd see her there all the time when I go to get dinner or lunch or dinner or whatever. And so finally I got the guts to go up and talk to her. She had a boyfriend at the time, and long story short, they ended up breaking up, and somehow I convinced her to start dating me. And so we ended up dating, I'm guessing for a year or two, maybe something like that. But anyway, what's significant about that is that she lived down the street, quite a ways, but a little ways. What's Miss Karen saying? Oh, this is my classmate, Karen McGee. Classmate, you were shy and always a good guy. Oh, bless you. I don't know if I was always a good guy, but but yeah, I was kind of shy. And anyway, it was amazing that I I even got her. I had the courage to sit down and talk to her. In fact, I'll never forget that. Let me just say this one thing, just because it's funny, is that when I sat down to talk to her, um, my cool little line to start with, my opening gesture was, "So, hey, what you studying there? Need some help?" And she was studying some like trigonometry or something like that. And like, I'm still doing algebra. You know what I mean? And so I looked at the book. She showed me what the book was. I was like, yep, I can't help you. Like, she was clearly out of my class. Like, no way possible. Um, but anyway, so she lived down the street from a recording studio, Rosemont Records. And so, she'd heard my songs and she thought I was a good songwriter and a good singer. So she convinces me to go down, and she convinces the owner of the studio to meet me. So she takes me to this studio, and I meet the owner, Al Taylor, and he brings me in and says, "Okay, I hear you're pretty good." He sits me down at this baby grand piano, and he says, "Okay, show me what you got." So I proceed to sing and play several of the songs I've written. And right there on the spot, he's like, "I want to sign you to a deal. I want to do a record deal, and I want to be your manager." So he ends up doing, so I signed a deal. And this may be news to some of you guys. I don't know. But so I signed this record deal with this independent label, Rosemont Records. And he says, we're not going to do an album yet. We're going to do an EP, which stands for extended play. And so for those of you who may remember, like an EP would look like the size of an album, but it would have sometimes one or two songs, the radio versions on one side. And then on the other side, they'd have an extended play of one of the songs. And usually it was the up-tempo one that was going to be played at dances and clubs and stuff like that. And it was a long version so that people could dance to it, right? And so that's what we were going to record. So as it turns out, he gave me creative, control in terms of what songs I wanted to do and how I wanted to do them. So he hired this band that he was used to working with, Chuck Turner and the Traffic Jam Band. He hired those musicians to come in one at a time, and we laid down tracks for two songs. One was a ballad called "Stay Be My Lady," and the other was an up-tempo song called "You're Bad." And so for both of the songs, I basically would record myself playing the piano. So if you understand multi-tracking, a lot of times sometimes bands will play all at once and they'll just record them all on the different tracks. But sometimes you go in and you record an instrument at a time. And so, or a couple of instruments at a time, just however you choose to do it. And so we did it an instrument at a time. And so we started with the drums. So we laid down the drums, and it was literally me telling them, making sounds in my mouth to tell the different musicians, this is what I want to hear. This is what this should sound like, in combination with Mr. Taylor. And so that's how we put together that record. And in the midst of that summer, and this is where one of the overlap of the Young Americans comes, is that was that summer when we were recording it, was the beginning of the summer, just going into the summer. That's when I got that call from Young Americans to go up to northern Michigan, to the Boyne Highlands, to the ski resort, and to do that. So because I knew when this record came out, I was going to have to be on stage and perform. When the Young Americans called me, I thought, this is perfect. This will give me a chance to go be on stage again in front of an audience in an intimate setting, and to get my performance chops back, especially dancing, because I hadn't been dancing at all. And so, my manager, producer decided, yeah, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and do that. So when you come back, we'll do this thing. So anyway, so I record this record, and they send me copies while I'm up in Michigan, and I end up selling some of the copies out there. It gets played on the radio station out there. I get interviewed by some DJs and stuff out there. I come back and it's on the radio in New Orleans, and it's being played in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas, maybe some other places, but that's as much as I know, right? And the song that's played is the the up tempo song "You're Bad," and so um, doing that, and then we start doing all these gigs and nightclubs and all this different stuff. And to be quite honest, without going into any detail, here I am, 18 years old, and I'm with a lot of these older guys, who've been around a long time, and we're going to these clubs and all this different stuff, and I just wasn't feeling it. It was like, this is great. I love the opportunity and everything, and you're getting me all these shows, and I'm headlining, and it's all this stuff, and it's great. I even got to open for Cool in the Gang once, indirectly, as I talked about before. Um, but I just wasn't feeling it, and so in my youth and my inexperience and all that stuff, turned to my manager and said, I don't want to do this anymore. And for whatever reason, he let me out of my contract. We had a 3-year deal, and he let me out of that contract right then and there, and said, if you're not happy, you're not going to do a good job, and I don't want to force you to do something you don't want to do. So, um, and you have to understand that at the time that happened, we were picking up momentum. Like, we're starting to make contacts and all this stuff, and I was getting these opportunities, but anyway, so walk away from it. And while I hadn't truly given up on the singer-songwriter thing, I just wasn't comfortable with the way it was going down. And one of the reasons that I ended up doing the boy band later was I discovered that the thing about me was I didn't want to be a solo artist. I always wanted that Jackson 5 experience. I wanted to be with a group of guys. I loved what I had with that that garage band when I was in high school, because we were all in it together. We all collaborated. We all worked together. Even if I did write the majority of the stuff, I mean, we were a team, and I was writing for the group, and I would have my quote unquote brothers on stage with me, and so that was much more appealing to me. And I discovered that that's what it was. That was my problem. So anyway, fast forward, and this is one of those things again where I said, okay, so that was it. That was a great experience, and I'll remember that when I finally do get my next record deal and blah, 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 whatever. So life goes on. All the stuff happens. I told you about all the young American stuff, and, raise a family, and, and life went on. And I got to do a lot of really cool, amazing things, whatever. But the first time I remember the whole thing with my record being revisited was this is when I moved back home, and let's say it was early 90s, because it was just prior to me bringing the Young Americans back to Bogalusa. I brought, or anyway, I kind of just lost where I was. Sorry. Okay. So I, oh man, I totally lost my point. What I was going to say. Anyway, early 90s, I moved back home, and that's what I was going to say. So I moved back home, and this was when just now getting cell phones and computers, and I mean, not just getting computers, but like personal computers and email and all that stuff. When all of a sudden someone contacts me from Europe and says, "Is this Bruce Sampson? Is this the guy that did the record You're Bad?" And I'm like, okay, who's messing with me? And I would hang up on these guys. Like, every once in a while, someone would call me, or I get a weird email from someone, like, okay, who's messing with me? Someone's joking around with me. Come to find out that my record somehow has made it to Europe and has become this underground cult classic record. And I'm like, wait, what? But I thought, okay, well, that's cute. That's neat. that someone's still playing that record, like, okay, that's kind of cool, whatever. I did some research later in years that followed, looked on Google and did some searching and stuff for my record and would find that not only was my record like this underground cult classic thing, but it was a collector's item. And people had literally been bidding and paying up to, I think the biggest price I saw was like 3 or 4 grand for one copy of my record. And so I'm like, what is going on? But anyway, I moved on, like, whatever. And so recently, and when I say recently, I mean like in the last month, I started getting more calls. And there was a gentleman, actually, and I'm skipping a part right now, but just because of time. There's a gentleman out of New Orleans, Bryce Nice. He's a DJ on WWOZ. Met him years ago, and we became friends. And I did an interview with him that ended up in this music magazine and stuff, where it talked about the music that I made in Rosemont Records and the impact it had on music out of New Orleans and stuff, which I didn't know. I didn't realize how big of a deal it was, and the part that I played in all of that. And so we've kept in touch over the years, and he and then another guy out of California who started reaching out to me as well recently. It's like, dude, we need to re-release your record. There's a demand for it. We need to put your record out there again. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And so sure enough, we are in the process now of working out a deal to re-release my record and put it out, and to possibly even have me go do some shows to perform that record out in California and maybe over in Europe, eventually, overseas. Anyway, eventually, it's going to be a minute. But anyway, there's another example of something that happened, an experience from my youth that came back. And so how many times in life do we all turn our backs on something or have an experience and think something is impossible? That, we're so sure it's impossible for this thing to happen, or for this to come back, or for me to have that experience. It's impossible, right? And this is all about embracing the possible. And when we do that, we forget about God. And I'm not really trying to preach, but I'm just trying to bring this all full circle into, again, how I analyze things and how I look at the timeline. And if you really examine your life and look at all those things and all the different moments in your life, like with these two experiences, and realize that each thing led to that thing that led to that, and that became possible because of this, and all of those things, that all of that, the answer is God. At least it is for me. And that's the whole tie-in to why I'm talking about it on a show called Believe TV, where we embrace the possible. Everything is possible. So every time we talk about, overcoming difficulties or achieving opportunities or change happening, I can't tell you how often I've heard in my hometown, or from people who are from my hometown, oh, that place will never change. Oh, that'll never happen. Oh, this will never happen. And I can tell you, I've been a witness to the impossible becoming possible over and over again in my life. And even when I've written it off, even when I've written me off, I'm grateful that God hasn't. And I hope in some way that this provides some sort of comfort or encouragement or inspiration for you. If there's something in your life right now that you're thinking, I walked away from it, or I was thrown out of it, or or whatever, or I'm past my prime and being able to do that or deal with that thing, I say trust God, and I say go for it, and I say embrace the possible, because it's it's doable. If these things that are happening to me are happening now, again, it ain't about me. Trust me, folks, when I say it ain't about me. It is most definitely about Him and His grace. And I am grateful to, yeah, I'm just grateful. And so I hope that some of you will be um, inspired by these stories and understand that anything is possible, you know, if you believe. So those are my two experiences from my youth that have come back and come back in a big way. And I am honored and blessed. And I hope that you'll pray for me in success in both, especially with the work with the young Americans. But I also want to be very clear: believe continues. In fact, that was one of the first things I said, is that's non-negotiable. That continues, because it is a completely different project to me. And I have an incredible team of partners and directors who are ready to get going. In fact, we had a meeting and that ended an hour before this show started, and it was all about. Thank you, Dee Dee. I appreciate that. um, it's all about. Bye, Miss Karen. Thank you. See you next week, and thank you for staying up. I appreciate it. Much love to you. Um, so, all of you who are watching this, whether it's live or on replay, or whether you share it with someone, know that Believe continues. Believe is coming. We're just trying to lock down some dates, but our plan right now is to do camps in Bogalusa, Louisiana, Washington Parish, in Mississippi, in hopefully in the Gallman area, but if not, in somewhere between Gallman and Brookhaven, somewhere in there, and in Slidell. So those are the three places that we plan to do in-person, full-blown camps. We may have some limits of participation, how many people, and all of that, uh, and social distancing and things of that nature. The safety things that we'll obviously incorporate, but we're gonna do it. So I hope you guys will help us put the word out and encourage your young people to be a part of that. But I also hope that you'll take from my message today uh, the oh, what has Miss Cynthia saying? So awesome again. Thank you, Bruce, for sharing the inspiration. Embrace the possible. Looking forward to the continuous blessing you bring to us all. Thank you so much, and you are a blessing to me. All of you are, with your encouragement. Uh, Throughout the week, I generally hear from folks who have told me, yeah, I don't really comment, but I love watching your program. And so thank you. So as long as that's the deal, and people are being positively impacted, I will continue to do so. Um, so thank you for the support. Thank you for all the love. Thank you for your prayers in advance. and and just know, keep believing, keep embracing the possible. You'll be amazed at what truly is possible when you believe. And we will see you guys next time.